Who is really shaping the future of Africa today? Is this still determined by global markets, foreign mining companies, and international financial interests, or are African nations beginning to reclaim greater control over the resources beneath their own soil? That question has become increasingly important as Burkina Faso released its mid-year government performance report, revealing that the Ministry of Energy, Mines and Quarries had already achieved 61.7% of its annual objectives by the end of June 2026. At the same time, more than 55 tons of gold moved through official national channels, representing an estimated market value of nearly $6 billion. These figures have sparked growing discussion far beyond Burkina Faso because they suggest that something more significant than higher gold prices may be taking place. For many observers, this is not simply another report about mining production. Instead, it raises a broader question about whether a country rich in natural resources can gradually redesign the way those resources are managed, monitored, and transformed into long-term national development. Gold has always been one of Burkina Faso's most valuable assets, but for many years, large portions of production from artisanal mining never entered official records. Smuggling networks, informal trading systems, and limited state oversight often reduce the economic benefits that remain inside the country. Today, government officials argue that a different model is beginning to emerge. New institutions, tighter oversight, stronger traceability, expanded state participation, and greater involvement of domestic businesses are all becoming part of a wider effort to strengthen national control over the mining sector. Supporters see these reforms as an important step toward improving transparency and increasing the value retained within Burkina Faso. Critics, however, question whether these changes can be sustained over the long term and whether they may discourage future investment. In today's video, we will examine what the 61.7% progress report actually measures, why more gold is now passing through official channels, how recent mining reforms are reshaping Burkina Faso's gold industry, what role Ibrahim Traore has played in this process, how international observers have responded, and what lessons other African nations may draw from this evolving model. Before we begin, if you enjoy balanced analysis of Africa's economic and geopolitical transformation, consider subscribing to the channel so you never miss our future discussions. To understand why Burkina Faso reached 61.7% of its annual objectives halfway through the year, we must first look beyond the impressive production figures. The real story is not simply about mining more gold. It is about transforming the entire system that governs how gold is produced, purchased, monitored, and ultimately contributes to national development. The Ministry of Energy, Mines and Quarries reported that by the end of June 2026, it had achieved 61.7% of its annual objectives. This performance was supported by 26 tons of gold produced from industrial mines and nearly 29 tons purchased from artisanal and semi-mechanized miners through official channels. Combined, more than 55 tons of gold were recorded by the government during the first 6 months of the year. To appreciate why this represents an important milestone, it is necessary to understand how Burkina Faso's gold sector traditionally operated. The country is home to approximately 17 industrial gold mines and more than 440 artisanal mining sites. Industrial operations generally function under formal licenses, modern equipment, and established reporting systems. Their production is relatively easy for government agencies to monitor, allowing taxes and royalties to be collected through official mechanisms. The artisanal mining sector has always presented a much greater challenge. Hundreds of thousands of people rely on small-scale mining for their income, often working in remote areas with limited government oversight. In the past, much of the gold extracted from these sites was sold directly to private buyers, who then transferred it to regional traders before it eventually entered international refining centers. By the time the gold reached global markets, tracing its true origin had become extremely difficult. This informal trading network meant that substantial quantities of gold never appeared in Burkina Faso's official statistics. As a result, the government collected less revenue, maintained smaller official reserves, and had limited visibility over the country's true mining output. More importantly, a significant share of the economic value generated by Burkina Faso's natural resources flowed outside the formal economy. This historical background explains why today's reforms focus not only on increasing production, but also on ensuring that more of the country's existing gold passes through transparent and accountable national institutions. The central question is no longer whether Burkina Faso possesses valuable mineral resources. The more important question is whether those resources can increasingly support national development instead of leaving the country through informal channels. The government believes that changing this situation requires more than stricter law enforcement. Instead, it has begun redesigning the way gold enters the formal economy. One of the most significant changes has been the expanded role of the National Company for Precious Substances, commonly known as SONASP. Rather than allowing most artisanal gold to pass through private middlemen, SONASP purchases gold directly from licensed artisanal and semi-mechanized miners, bringing a much larger share of production into official government channels. This approach serves several objectives at the same time. First, it improves traceability. Every quantity of gold that enters the official system can be weighed, recorded, verified, and monitored before it reaches the market. This makes it far more difficult for illegally traded gold to be mixed with legally produced gold. Second, the system strengthens government oversight by providing more accurate information about national production. Reliable statistics are essential for economic planning, tax collection, and long-term resource management. Another important objective is reducing illegal smuggling. For many years, unofficial buyers often offered miners immediate cash without requiring documentation, making informal transactions attractive despite the long-term economic losses for the country. Under the new approach, the government seeks to provide an alternative legal market where miners can sell their production through authorized channels. While illegal trading has not disappeared, expanding official purchasing creates stronger incentives for miners to participate in the formal economy. The reforms extend beyond gold purchasing. Authorities have also increased inspections of buying centers, strengthened controls over weighing and packaging procedures, and intensified efforts to identify fraudulent trading networks. At the same time, new artisanal mining cooperatives have been established, and designated mining corridors are being organized to improve safety, environmental management, and regulatory supervision. These measures are intended to transform artisanal mining from a largely informal activity into a more structured sector that contributes directly to national development. Taken together, these reforms help explain why more than 55 tons of gold passed through official channels during the first half of 2026. The increase was not simply the result of discovering new deposits. It reflected a gradual shift in how existing production was being captured, documented, and integrated into Burkina Faso's formal economy. That structural transformation may ultimately prove even more important than the production figures themselves. As more gold began entering official channels, Burkina Faso expanded its reforms beyond purchasing and monitoring. The government recognized that improving oversight alone would not be enough if the legal and institutional framework remained unchanged. As a result, a series of mining reforms were introduced to strengthen state participation, encourage domestic businesses, and create a more organized mining sector capable of generating long-term economic value. One of the most important developments has been the growing role of the State Mining Asset Management Company, known as SOPAMIB. Unlike the traditional model, where the government primarily acted as a regulator and tax collector, SOPAMIB allows the state to participate more directly in selected mining projects. This represents a significant shift in philosophy. Rather than simply granting licenses and collecting royalties, the government is seeking to become an active stakeholder in parts of the mining industry while maintaining regulatory oversight. Alongside this institutional change, Burkina Faso has introduced new measures to increase local participation throughout the mining value chain. Recent legislation encourages mining companies to purchase more goods and services from Burkinabe businesses whenever possible. The policy also promotes greater employment opportunities for local workers, supports technology transfer, and encourages domestic companies to develop expertise that was previously concentrated among foreign contractors. The objective is not only to extract gold, but also to expand the number of economic activities that remain inside the country. Another important reform involves the organization of artisanal mining. Instead of allowing thousands of individual miners to operate without coordination, authorities have promoted the creation of legally recognized cooperatives and designated mining corridors. These structures make it easier to provide technical support, improve safety standards, strengthen environmental management, and ensure that production is properly documented before entering the national market. Taken together, these reforms represent a broader effort to reshape the mining sector from the ground up. The government is attempting to build institutions that capture more economic value without depending entirely on higher production levels. Whether these policies will deliver lasting results remains an open question. However, they help explain why the Ministry of Energy, Mines and Quarries reported substantial progress during the first half of 2026. The focus is no longer limited to increasing extraction. It is increasingly centered on building a mining system that is more transparent, better organized, and more closely aligned with Burkina Faso's long-term development goals. While stronger institutions and updated mining laws have helped improve oversight, the government has also focused on capturing more value from every ounce of gold produced. For decades, Burkina Faso, like many resource-rich countries, exported most of its gold after only the initial stages of production. The highest value activities, including refining, certification, and parts of the international trading process, were often completed outside the country. This meant that although Burkina Faso supplied the raw material, a significant share of the economic value was created elsewhere. The current administration has identified this gap as a strategic priority. One of its most ambitious initiatives is the construction of the country's first national gold refinery. The project is intended to strengthen Burkina Faso's ability to process gold domestically, rather than relying entirely on foreign refining centers. If fully operational, the refinery could improve traceability, enhance quality control, support the development of local technical expertise, and allow a larger portion of the mining value chain to remain within the national economy. At the same time, the government has invested in facilities capable of processing mining residues, demonstrating that its strategy extends beyond extracting newly mined gold. Recovering valuable minerals from existing waste materials not only increases efficiency, but also reflects a broader effort to maximize the country's natural resources. Combined with stronger monitoring systems, these investments support the government's long-term objective of transforming Burkina Faso from a simple exporter of raw minerals into a country capable of performing more advanced industrial activities. However, it is important to recognize that building infrastructure alone does not guarantee success. A refinery must operate efficiently, maintain internationally recognized quality standards, secure a consistent supply of raw material, and remain financially sustainable. Reliable electricity, skilled technicians, effective management, and transparent governance are all essential if these projects are to deliver their expected economic benefits. Without these supporting conditions, expensive infrastructure may struggle to achieve its intended impact. For this reason, many analysts view the refinery as one important component of a much larger transformation rather than a complete solution by itself. The government's broader objective is to create a mining sector where extraction, purchasing, processing, and value creation increasingly occur within Burkina Faso. If these different reforms continue to reinforce one another, they could gradually reshape how the country's natural resources contribute to long-term economic development rather than simply increasing short-term production statistics. At the center of many of these reforms stands President Ibrahim Traore, whose administration has made national control over strategic resources a defining element of its economic agenda. However, it is important to understand his role accurately. The Ministry of Energy, Mines and Quarries, together with agencies such as SONASP and SOPAMIB, is responsible for implementing mining policies on a daily basis. Ibrahim Traore's contribution lies primarily in providing the political direction and institutional support that allow these reforms to move forward. Rather than managing individual mining operations, he has consistently promoted a broader vision in which Burkina Faso gains greater influence over every stage of its mining value chain. One of the central ideas behind this vision is that natural resources should create long-term national prosperity instead of serving only as export commodities. For decades, Burkina Faso produced large quantities of gold, yet much of the processing, refining, financing, and international trading occurred outside the country. Under the current administration, the objective is to retain a larger share of those activities within Burkina Faso. This explains the emphasis on expanding state participation in selected mining projects, supporting domestic businesses, encouraging local employment, and investing in refining capacity. Traore has also repeatedly emphasized the importance of developing national expertise rather than relying exclusively on foreign technology and external operators. His government has encouraged Burkinabe engineers, entrepreneurs, and technical specialists to play a greater role in industrial development. In this sense, the reforms extend beyond mining policy. They represent an attempt to strengthen domestic institutions and reduce long-term dependence on external actors in strategic sectors of the economy. Supporters argue that this approach reflects a broader effort to strengthen economic sovereignty. They believe that countries rich in natural resources should retain greater control over how those resources are managed and how the resulting wealth is distributed. Critics, however, caution that increased state participation must be accompanied by professional management, transparent governance, and clear legal frameworks. Without those elements, expanding public ownership alone may not generate better economic outcomes. Ultimately, Ibrahim Traore's influence should be understood less as a direct cause of every production increase and more as a political force behind a comprehensive restructuring of Burkina Faso's mining strategy. Whether these reforms achieve their long-term objectives will depend not only on political leadership, but also on the effectiveness of the institutions responsible for putting those policies into practice. Although Ibrahim Traore's policies have attracted significant attention across Africa, they have also generated mixed reactions from international investors, mining companies, and financial analysts. These responses should not be viewed simply as support or opposition. Instead, they reflect a broader debate about how countries rich in natural resources can balance national sovereignty with the need to attract long-term investment and advanced technology. One of the primary concerns expressed by some international investors is policy predictability. Large-scale mining projects often require investments worth hundreds of millions of dollars and may take decades to recover their costs. For this reason, mining companies value legal stability, transparent regulations, and confidence that contracts will remain enforceable throughout the life of a project. When governments announce significant reforms or expand state participation in strategic industries, investors naturally seek reassurance that future policy changes will remain clear and consistent. Burkina Faso's decision to increase state involvement in selected mining assets has therefore prompted questions within the international mining community. Some observers worry that expanding government ownership could discourage future foreign investment if businesses become uncertain about property rights or future operating conditions. Others have pointed to the country's ongoing security challenges as an additional factor influencing investment decisions, arguing that political stability and security remain just as important as mining legislation. However, These concerns represent only one side of the discussion. Burkina Faso's government argues that its objective is not to eliminate foreign investment, but to ensure that the country's natural resources generate greater benefits for its own citizens. Officials have emphasized that responsible investors remain welcome, provided that mining projects operate within a framework that promotes transparency, local participation, and a fairer distribution of economic value. In this context, expanding state participation is presented not as a rejection of international cooperation, but as an effort to strengthen national bargaining power. This distinction is important. The debate is not simply about whether governments or private companies should control mining assets. Rather, it is about finding a sustainable balance between public interest and private investments. Long-term success will depend on Burkina Faso's ability to demonstrate that stronger national control can coexist with transparent governance, legal certainty, operational efficiency, and an investment climate that continues to attract responsible international partners. Only by achieving that balance can the country's mining reforms deliver lasting economic benefits. A balanced assessment of Burkina Faso's mining reforms requires examining not only the concerns raised by international observers, but also the arguments presented by the government and many African analysts. Critics often suggest that expanding state participation in the mining sector could reduce investor confidence, slow future exploration, or discourage foreign capital. While these concerns deserve careful consideration, they do not necessarily mean that Burkina Faso's current strategy is destined to fail. Much depends on how these reforms are implemented over the coming years. One important point is that greater national participation does not automatically mean excluding private investment. Around the world, many resource-producing countries maintain significant government ownership in strategic sectors while continuing to attract international companies. The critical factors are transparency, predictable regulations, professional management, and respect for contractual obligations. If these conditions are maintained, state participation and private investment can coexist within the same mining industry. Supporters of Burkina Faso's approach argue that the country has a legitimate right to seek a larger share of the wealth generated by its natural resources. For many years, Africa has supplied enormous quantities of minerals to global markets. Yet, many producing countries have continued to face limited industrial development, high unemployment, and inadequate infrastructure. From this perspective, increasing domestic participation is viewed not as an act of economic isolation, but as an effort to improve the long-term distribution of benefits created by national resources. At the same time, supporters also recognize that ownership alone cannot guarantee success. Efficient institutions, independent oversight, qualified technical personnel, and responsible financial management remain essential. A mining company owned by the state must still compete under commercial realities. It must control costs, maintain production, attract skilled workers, and operate according to internationally accepted standards. Without strong governance, public ownership could become a financial burden rather than an economic advantage. Perhaps the most important lesson from Burkina Faso is that natural resource policy should not be viewed as a choice between complete state control and unrestricted private ownership. The real challenge is designing a system that combines national sovereignty with economic efficiency. If Burkina Faso succeeds in maintaining transparency while strengthening domestic participation, its experience may provide valuable insights for other African nations seeking to capture a greater share of the value generated by their own natural resources. Beyond Burkina Faso itself, the country's recent mining reforms have attracted attention across Africa because they raise a much broader question. Can other resource-rich nations capture a greater share of the wealth generated by their own natural resources? While every country faces unique economic and political circumstances, Burkina Faso's experience offers several important lessons that extend far beyond its borders. The first lesson is that increasing production alone is not enough. Many African countries possess abundant mineral resources, Yet, a significant portion of the value created by those resources leaves the continent through processing, refining, financing, and international trading activities located elsewhere. Burkina Faso's reform suggests that governments should pay as much attention to controlling the value chain as they do to expanding production. Recording more gold through official channels, strengthening traceability, and improving transparency may ultimately generate greater long-term benefits than simply extracting additional tons of ore. A second lesson involves the formalization of artisanal mining. Millions of Africans depend on small-scale mining for their livelihoods, making it unrealistic to rely solely on enforcement measures. Instead, governments may achieve better results by creating legal purchasing systems, encouraging mining cooperatives, simplifying licensing procedures, and providing miners with economic incentives to participate in the formal economy. Such an approach can reduce illegal trading while improving safety, environmental standards, and government oversight. Another important lesson concerns governance. Expanding state participation in strategic industries should never be viewed as an objective by itself. Public institutions must remain transparent, professionally managed, and financially accountable. Without effective governance, greater state ownership may simply transfer inefficiencies from one system to another. Sustainable success requires capable institutions that can balance commercial performance with public responsibility. Finally, Burkina Faso demonstrates that natural resources should support broader national development rather than becoming the economy's only engine of growth. Revenue generated from gold can help finance roads, electricity, education, healthcare, agriculture, and industrial diversification. These investments create opportunities that continue long after individual mines reach the end of their productive lives. In this sense, the true measure of success is not the number of tons extracted each year, but whether natural wealth is transformed into lasting prosperity for future generations across Africa. As Burkina Faso moves forward with its mining reforms, one conclusion becomes increasingly clear. The story behind the Ministry of Energy, Mines and Quarries reaching 61.7% of its annual objectives is not simply a story about producing more gold. It is the story of a government attempting to redesign how one of Africa's most valuable natural resources is managed, monitored, and integrated into national development. Whether these reforms ultimately achieve all of their objectives remains to be seen, but they have already shifted the conversation from production alone to questions of governance, transparency, and long-term economic strategy. Throughout this discussion, we have seen that the government's approach combines several interconnected initiatives. More gold is being directed through official purchasing channels. Institutions responsible for monitoring production have been strengthened. Domestic participation in the mining industry has been expanded. Investments in refining and value-added processing are intended to retain a greater share of economic activity within the country. At the same time, these reforms continue to face important challenges, including maintaining investor confidence, ensuring transparent governance, improving security, and demonstrating that increased state participation can deliver measurable benefits for ordinary citizens. The experience of Burkina Faso also carries significance beyond its own borders. Across West Africa and the wider Sahel region, governments are increasingly debating how strategic resources should contribute to national development. Leaders such as Ibrahim Traore in Burkina Faso, Assimi Goïta in Mali, and Abdurrahmane Chiani in Niger have all placed greater emphasis on resource sovereignty, while organizations such as the African Union continue to discuss long-term economic transformation across the continent. These developments remain an important focus of African news because they influence not only Burkina Faso, but also the broader future of West Africa and its relationships with international partners, including France and many other global investors. Ultimately, the lasting success of these reforms will not be measured by headlines or political speeches. It will be measured by whether stronger institutions produce greater transparency, whether mining revenues improve the lives of ordinary citizens, and whether economic growth creates opportunities for future generations. The most important question therefore remains unanswered. Can Burkina Faso build a mining model that successfully balances national sovereignty, responsible investment, and sustainable development? Only time will provide the final answer. If you found this analysis valuable, please share your thoughts in the comments below and subscribe to the channel for more in-depth discussions on Africa's economic transformation and geopolitical future. We sincerely appreciate your time and support. Every video on this channel is carefully researched, thoughtfully written, and meticulously edited by our dedicated team. We don't rely on automated production or shortcuts to create our content. Every story, every visual, and every detail is crafted with genuine care, passion, and a commitment to bringing you meaningful, high-quality videos.